how do they manage the establishment and the mainstream media? How do they manage to sort of communicate where, the mainstream media don't know what not to promote, not to talk about, like Yemen? I often wonder, do they send one another memos, or how do they know what not to talk about? Because they seem to be so on page with one another. You know what I mean? That you just don't hear about Yemen hardly at all. And I just think, how do they, you know what I'm saying? Or is
Well,
that a strange?
well, first of all, I think we should make sure we understand. It's not like some concerted conspiracy where people are meeting together and talking about what they're going to ignore. It's much, I would say, simpler, but also more insidious than that. And again, I mean, I joked earlier, someone had commented about how capitalists have no morals. It's systemic. And that's the point I really want to stress with the media. The media is an industry. It is a for-profit industry. This is not a non-profit, institution that exists to serve the people. This is a for-profit company or industry rather that exists to make money. That's the goal. Every media outlet, almost every single one, their goal is not to provide news to the public. Their goal is not to inform people what's going on in the world, to be better citizens, etc. Their goal is to make money, and everything else is, at the end of the day, going to revolve around that goal. So when it comes to issues that people cover, what people don't understand is one of the reasons that corporate media outlets are so obsessed with issues like Russiagate and Russia and Putin. It's not simply because the Democratic Party here in the U.S. is using this as a convenient political scapegoat for losing to Donald Trump, a far-right billionaire bigot. It's not just because it helps justify U.S. military buildup, the military-industrial complex. It's also because it gets great ratings. I mean, these kinds of stories get people to tune in. They watch it. They listen to it. They read about it. Yemen is not sexy. Yemen is not popular. No one even knows where Yemen is. They don't know what it is. They don't know the history of it. And a lot of people have a mistaken view. They simply say, oh, well, people have been killing each other in that region forever. No, that's not true. Yemen has actually seen very few wars. This violence inside the country is relatively new. And, it's similar to what we hear about Israel-Palestine. People are always like, well, they've been fighting for 1,000 years. No, Israel was created in 1948. This is a very new conflict, and it's a conflict in which we ourselves are directly involved. Our government is funding all of these conflicts. So that's certainly part of it. It's ratings, it's money, it's advertising revenue. And then there's also the element of what the U.S. government essentially wants. And the irony of this, I mean, you mentioned I write a lot for a media watchdog here in the U.S. called Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, FAIR. And one of the things I write a lot about is how media outlets, for the most part, serve as a kind of mouthpiece for the government. And this is not true simply of the U.S., of course. This is true of many countries. It's true to an extent of the Australian media. It's true of the British media, but especially in the U.S. Noam Chomsky, many listeners probably know him, the renowned scholar, dissident, and media critic. He has a very famous book called Manufacturing Consent, in which he does a detailed political and economic analysis of the mass media. He looks at the political ties, but he also looks at the economic ties. He looks at corporations, what they're invested in. So as an example, here's one of countless examples. The Washington Post, probably the second most important newspaper in the U.S. after the New York Times, is owned by the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, who's the head of Amazon. He recently took over Bill Gates as being the richest man on the planet. He is so wealthy, more than $80 billion. I mean, approaching $100 billion. It's unfathomable the levels of wealth these plutocrats have. He owns the Washington Post, and he also owns Amazon. And Amazon just happens to have a very large multi-million-dollar deal with the CIA. So, I mean, again, you can look at those kinds of ties, but in general, that's not unique. Those kinds of ties exist throughout the industry. You look at CNN. CNN keeps hiring people like Michael Hayden. Michael Hayden is the former director of the CIA and the NSA. He was director of both of them. The the CIA and the NSA. It's already enough to be director of one. They're both horrible enough institutions. And Michael Hayden was recently hired by CNN as a regular commentator. These are literal government officials who are being hired by supposed independent media outlets to tell us supposed news. I mean, they don't even have any pretense of independence anymore. They also hired James Clapper. Clapper is a perjurer. He lied under oath to Congress. He was intelligence official who lied about NSA spying. He is now also being hired by CNN as a regular commentator. So
they're tragic, aren't they? It's tragic.
I mean, it's not surprising that conflicts like the war in Yemen have been ignored.